And El Rey says perspective is a hell of a thing. It sure is. Someone was talking about the other Caribbean countries. And so, is it Barbados that just had, they introduced their minimum wage at $16. It increased to $16 and change US. I think it was them. Hold on. Let me just double check her website, the CMR website. I believe that was Barbados. And everybody's like, oh my God, Cayman needs to do $16 an hour, blah, blah, blah. So this person said to his Bayesian counterparts, what do you guys pay your helpers? Because the minimum wage, and this is the irony of it, right? I know people who are advocating for an increase in minimum wage, not because they're in that bracket, but because they're on the bandwagon. If everybody says we need to, is Bermuda or Barbados? Which one was it? No, Bermuda. My apologies. That was not Barbados. I always get these B islands mixed up. Bermuda implements a $16.40 minimum wage, right? Implements that. That was just June last month. So this person was saying to someone from Bermuda, well, how does this work for your domestic workers, your helpers? And they were like, who? Because in Cayman, and again, I see this, people are like, oh yeah, we need to increase the minimum wage because cost of living. Those people don't make minimum wage, Naina. In this country, my suspicion is the vast majority of people impacted by the minimum wage are not even Caymanians, it's foreign nationals. Stick a pin, because everybody needs to be making a livable wage, whether you're Caymanian or not. But the one area that it will impact Caymanians is with domestic workers. How many of y'all are prepared to pay domestic workers $16 an hour? I know Caymanian families right now who are complaining that they can't pay domestic workers $6 an hour, and they expect them to work around the clock and handle a bag of children, all 4 or 5 children, sometimes children with special needs, and all sorts of stuff. So the very people who are saying we need to increase minimum wage are the very people who will be negatively impacted by the minimum wage, because as employers, they will have to pay their domestic workers whatever that minimum wage increase is. Y'all not thinking about it, but it's coming down the pipeline. And what does that mean for you? How many of you can afford to pay even more right now for your domestic care? I'm going to wait. I'm hearing crickets. Raise your hands for those of you who are going to be happy to pay $10 an hour for a helper to take care of your children. Okay. So the person who was sharing this story yesterday, Caymanian professional, said his Bermuda counterpart was like, what are domestic workers? We don't have domestic workers like that. And he's like, oh, you don't? No. That seems to be a thing that is uniquely Caymanian for us to have helpers in your home. The person in Bermuda said, well, aren't you guys lucky? We have grandparents who now have to all live together in a household in order to make ends meet. Aunts and uncles, they're still helping. And the government there has a system where I think it's from 7 in the morning until 5:30. They have schools that are open during those hours, and you can just leave your children in the care of these schools. And you pay a little fee of like $50 or $100 or whatever to extend that option. And what do you do during the summer? I don't know what you do in Bermuda. Paul, can you share that with us? Call in, Paul. I'd love to hear your perspective on this, because again, it's one of those things, as we just said, perspective is a hell of a thing. Knowledge, information is a hell of a thing. Paul, you can call me on WhatsApp because I would like to know. I'm curious. How does this work? Even in terms of someone, I think it was Everything 345 posted a couple of days ago. Oh, why is it that Cayman has the highest kilowatt usage? Not forget about the actual dollar amount of the bill, but this was like, oh, we use 700. Let me see what the average household is. but they had it up like, oh, we have, the highest kilowatt usage or whatever for the Caribbean. And I said, are we still questioning this? Like, y'all don't know? It's because, let me see if I can find everything. How do they spell? Oh, they don't have that G on the end. Folks, it is because we are spoiled here in the Cayman Islands and enjoy certain luxuries that they do not elsewhere in the world, or elsewhere in the region, I should say, because we have the highest in the region. So we have the highest in the region because we're burning AC 24/7. And so, I hate to tell y'all, but that costs money. That is your biggest usage is air conditioning. Other places in the world, they've got mountains, or in the Caribbean, they might have mountainous terrain. They just used to the heat. They're not spending that kind of money. Open the windows, whatever. They don't have all these appliances drawing down on your power. Good morning, caller. Welcome to the program.
Hey, good morning, Sandy. I don't think that we should sit here and say that it doesn't make sense to increase the minimum wage. Let's think about it.
No,
Domestic
I'm
help
not.
is
I'm
one
not
thing.
saying that it doesn't make sense. What I'm saying is,
Yeah.
people need to be realistic about the fallout of that. And I'm asking people who are in the domestic area, which accounts for a lot of the work permits on this island, the employers of those people, how many of them are willing to pay $10, $15, $20 or whatever it's going to be for a domestic worker?
Oh, because I think you say, well, you can't afford a domestic helper, but there's
Well, they
other
might not
things
be able to with the
that
increase. So people
yeah,
need to start
I
thinking about
know.
that. So, I
Right,
mean,
that is
that'll be on
true.
them
That
to
is
figure
true.
out.
But then there's other bills that um is increasing all the time, and that
Mm-hmm.
people, not everybody in the island has a domestic helper. So we can't say that what will happen then for us that, or some of us that have domestic helpers,
Well, I can
because
tell
there's a
you that
lot of
the
it's
point that I'm
increased.
trying to make is that even the concept of having a domestic helper in the Caribbean seems to be something that is largely
Yes,
Caymanian.
it's true.
So
I
in
know
in
that's
yeah, so
that is
in
true.
Bermuda,
Yeah,
what
but
this
then
what this person told the Caymanian guy is, he said, you know what? He said in Bermuda, it's like the 5%, the top 5% earning, the rich people, in other words, they're the ones with nannies and domestic helpers. The average person in Bermuda does not have a domestic helper.
yeah, and yeah, and I quite agree. I quite agree with that. Even here in the UK, you know how people say they must you have a cleaner come in once a week or
Mm-hmm.
whatever the case, if you do need. But I thought you meant like don't advocate for increase, because then
No, I mean, I
that
just
wouldn't
want
be.
people to be prepared. What will
Yeah.
be the reality if we get an increase? So, as employers of domestic workers, you're going to be paying more
Well,
for
what they're
that.
doing now, they'll
You're
continue to do, and that's abuse people
well,
by not paying them decent salary.
and is
So
that
they're
is
doing
that
that now.
going
It
to be any
doesn't
better
matter.
than, I mean, is that what we want? I mean, obviously not. There's going to be
No,
some
it's
enforcement.
not. It is common day slavery for how some people could get away with, paying
Mhm.
a person a minimum wage, and they're taking care of the whole
Yeah.
income
So
of
is it
children.
going to
That
get
is
worse
wrong.
now, you think, when the minimum wage is increased? Are those abuses
Well,
going to
the
get
thing is
worse?
about the thing is about it, like I always say, immigration needs to put education out there for people to know what the laws is, maybe even public services to say, you don't work for that kind of money,
Mm.
but then again, we got people that coming from
They're
all
so
over that
desperate.
will sit down and, yeah, desperately thing. But it has to have a standard, because if you got a certain standard of living, you can't expect to just pay people what you feel like paying. It needs to be a threshold to for people to have decent salary.
Mhm.
So that may change some of them parents that want to be out all hours and days and night, and then the nanny is home with the kids for 24/7, and giving them that minimum wage.
Mhm.
So I just think that people need to, I mean, government needs to put in place something that's going
Yeah.
to let
And
people
and
know
and
that you
listen,
don't
if
work
you're a
for
small business owner, we
minimum.
do have another call in the line. I'm going to have join in here, but if you're a
Yeah,
small
that's fine.
business owner, right, and you're now having to again increase your expenditure, which includes paying your staff, how are you going to absorb that cost of an increased minimum wage? You don't think that means that your goods and
Oh
services
dear.
are going to go up?
Well, we goods and services are higher than most should be anyway. But I mean, that'll give them another good excuse to go through the roof with the prices. That's why things need to be put in place. Government need to put things in place, caps on certain items. I think at least,
Mm.
so that the it wouldn't be, such a high cost to the person's living.
Hmm.
Other than that, they're gonna just use people and abuse people for
Mm.
people that are desperate. So that's what government need to start to at least try to get something in place so that these people can, because you know what happens too. They come, they say, okay, we'll give you 1,000. I mean, some of them poor people is working for half of that amount.
Mhm.
So whatever is promised on that application for permit needs to be paid. That is the whole thing. Anyway, Sandy, thank you.
All right, my dear. Thanks very much. All right. Morning caller. Welcome to the program.
Morning, Sandy. How are you?
Not bad. How you doing?
Thank you. I just wanted to say I have a tremendous amount of respect for that previous caller.
Mm-hmm.
Always insightful. But again, I'm with you on this one. And I myself have a domestic helper, and
Mm-hmm.
I am not in the lowest earning bracket
Mm-hmm.
at all. I'm a professional employee, and I think I make a reasonably good living.
Mm-hmm.
However, expenses are also high. And not because of reckless or irresponsible spending. It's just the world we live in, particularly here in Cayman.
Mm-hmm.
But I want to, like you, and I actually had to point this out to my helper, and I would say I'm more than slightly above minimum wage. But
Mm-hmm.
I assure you, if the current minimum wage moves $1,
Mm-hmm.
that domestic helper quickly becomes something that is out of reach for not just me, because there are people who are earning far less than I am, who are having to make the sacrifice because they need a domestic helper. And while I do believe it's a luxury, for some people that is the only option to get a domestic helper. And it's not that we want to have a helper sitting there in our house looking at the walls or whatever while our children are at school. But in reality, it's very difficult, first of all, to get one who's willing to work from 2 to 5 or 2 to 6. It's very difficult and it's not sustainable, because you're going to want to pay what minimum wage is, which is, it's difficult at best. Then you're going to want to have that person come in when your child is sick, when they've probably gone out there and hustled out of work to keep their head above water. It's just unrealistic. But for me, the most important thing, and I had to have the conversation with my own helper to say, listen, it's not that I don't think that people shouldn't be paid a living wage. I actually think we need to do away with minimum wage and get a living wage. But who is to determine what that is? I myself have been looking into this minimum wage for quite some time, and it tends to be the people in education is a hell of a thing. It tends to be the people who are on minimum wage who are banging on about increase the minimum wage. And let me tell you, you could increase the minimum wage to $100 an hour. It'll still do nothing for the people who are earning minimum wage. The problem that you had before will continue to exist. Matter of fact, it will exacerbate itself, because guess what? The cashier is going to also need minimum wage. The gas pump attendant is going to also need minimum wage. The gardener, minimum wage. And all of those might seem like very insignificant until you realize those are almost all essential services. Like, who's going to check out your groceries at the grocery store? And guess what? Businesses are in business to make a profit, not for charity.
Exactly.
Not for charity.
Yep.
Not business
And what do you think about this concept of having government tell you as a business owner what to charge for services and fees? Somebody just said to me,
that's the trickle down effect.
yeah, well,
That's
someone just
right.
said, good morning. I'm struggling to follow your caller's logic. She seems to be advocating an increase in minimum wage, but then is concerned that it will lead to prices of goods and services being increased. Also, about caps, what caps does she advocate? CIG already has caps on prices of professional medical fees. So what's next? And I mean, those physicians tell you that they've not had By the way, that professional fee cap has been in place since 2002. So the medical profession, although we might argue that because obviously they're professionals, to have a cap in place since 2002, that's what, 20 something years ago? Is that fair to them?
And this is it. But then when we go to the doctors as patients and we are paying, in our minds, we say, well, how much is it? Just as an example, to have this tooth extracted, and they say $100. We're expecting that we're going to pay $20, and in some cases we leave there paying $60. But what they're not explaining to us, and quite frankly shouldn't have, so the physician that is, or the service provider, is that, listen, we are only being compensated at a rate of $60. So we're only able to claim back to the insurance 80% of $60, not 80% of the actual service, 80% of the government indicated price of that particular service. So everybody is getting shafted when it comes to insurance. That is a whole other realm of ridiculous, if you ask me, right? But for me, the minimum wage, and I had spoken to people when the minimum wage had increased who were also minimum wage workers, and one in particular was a security guard at the airport, and he said to be quite frank, minimum wage did nothing for them either, because they were already earning $6 an hour, so they benefited nothing, and that is another thing. So if the minimum wage goes to $8 an hour, I will use domestic helpers because I think that is going to be the most impacted job. If that goes to $8 an hour, there are already helpers who are earning $8 an hour. Those ones who are earning $10 an hour.
And this is where I'm concerned that, when I ask the question, I think the minimum wage advisory committee is coming back on the program maybe this week. But when I ask the question, who is making $6 an hour? What does that person look like? They can't really say. They don't know. It's more like anecdotal, like, oh yeah, we think, we know it's mostly expat. Like, we need to have that information concrete. That's why ESO is there. That's why we need that data, because, if it's 90% of expat workers who are making minimum wage and they fall into these categories of employment, increase in the minimum wage for those individuals helps Cayman how exactly? You might have a counterproductive thing happening because of the increase in the minimum wage.
But this is what I've always said, and this is not me in any way saying, oh, well, they come here to work and they should spend all of their money here. That's not what I'm saying.
Yes.
Despite the current minimum wage, and I would say no, because it's relatively high in most cases from where these people are coming from. What they earn here in a week, they would earn there in a month.
Yeah.
That's not a knock at anybody, or me saying that, oh, well, people should come here and be mistreated or ill-treated or work for less than. That's not what I'm saying at all. But when people come here knowing that the cost of living is ridiculously high, they come here knowing what the minimum wage is, and then we are meant to bend over backwards so that they can repatriate more money, that they can take more money out of the Caymanian economy, because that's exactly what that translates into. And then they look at people like me and say, well, what do you expect them to do? Well, if you come here and you know that we drive on the left, don't come here and pick up a stink about you want to drive on the right. Go somewhere that drives on the right. Go somewhere that drives on the right. But I don't think, personally for me, having a helper is not a luxury. It is a necessity. I cannot go to work if I don't
and let me be very clear. The point that I was trying to make when I was talking about the comparison of Cayman versus Bermuda, and I have one of their MPs who might jump on the conversation this morning, is that in Bermuda, it is considered a luxury. In Cayman, it is not. The average person requires a helper. And so the average person now will also be impacted by the increase in the minimum wage. And that's a serious factor that I think people need to consider.
Well, I spoke to a friend who is a Jamaican economist, and he was just saying to me how unrealistic, and he actually said, and just so you know, that's not unique to Cayman. it's more of a Western Caribbean thing. But
well, here's let me join on a caller here, and then I'm gonna read this comment. So Al says that no employee should suffer because you can't afford to take care of your household. Sanita says Caymanians need to utilize grandparents and cut out domestic helpers. So are you able to utilize grandparents, caller?
Okay, so in my case, both my parents, my mother is 56. My dad is 63. Both are still working. Both still work.
Yep.
And
I mean, excuse me, but I don't have that option either. I mean, one is in her 80s, and why should I burden, even if I could, why should I burden an 80-something-year-old woman to look after my child? Like, that's not like, I personally don't believe that your parents are there to raise your children after they've raised an entire generation. Do they not get a break at some point? Some people in their 70s and 80s already have dementia, and they're struggling with just managing their own lives. So why are we putting this burden on elderly people?
They've raised you, now they must come behind and
raise your children too.
It's simply ridiculous. I have a very particular stance on grandparents. I believe that they are, they are weekend people. They see them, they spoil the crap out of them and send them into their parents. That's not saying that, that if you're in dire need, that, that it should be an exceptional circumstance. I personally feel that my parents have raised me and my siblings. It is time for us to raise our kids. They didn't send us out there to go home. They didn't send us out there to go, and nobody considers that. They just somehow say, I need help and you have to help. No, my dad said there's only two things you gotta do. That's die and stay black. And in some cases, you don't even gotta stay black no more. So you got relegated to die.
Oh, the bleaching cream and cake soap is strong. Leave me there, caller. We do have another caller on the line.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Appreciate those comments. Caller, good morning and welcome. Oh, hold on. Do we have? Okay. So caller, good morning and welcome to the program.
Hello, good morning.
Okay, let me see now. We've got two callers. So 1654, you're up first.
Yes, good morning, ma'am.
Yes, good morning.
I don't know what you made that woman hang up for. I was enjoying her imagery, and that's all I called to say.
Okay.
Oh gosh. And her analogies are spot on. We drive on the left here, the crap will drive on the right.
Okay.
And the government, I hope the premier is listening this morning. Oh, that was painless, simple. Simple and efficient. Right there. Abide, reinforce. Oh my gosh. Caller, please call back. I'm listening intently. Thank you. Bye.
Okay, next caller. Good morning.
Morning.
Hi
I'm
there.
gonna be the unpopular opinion here.
Okay.
Probably take some heat for that, but I think similarly to what the caller was saying, that domestic helpers come here, they know how much they're making, X, Y, and Z. Well, at the same time, we live here, we know how expensive it is. So if we can't afford to have kids, quote unquote, which we often love to say that about people, right? If you can't afford to have kids, why are you having kids? I think domestic helper and also a domestic helper and a nanny should be differentiated. So if you have a nanny taking care of your kids, and that's all they're doing, and they're not cleaning and cooking and etc., perhaps $6 is worth it. But if you like what the first caller was saying about modern day slavery, when you have someone cleaning your house all day, cooking for a family of 4 or 5, and taking care of the children, I think that is modern day slavery, and I feel like it is a luxury to have that. And also have another question. In Cayman, I don't know if you know about this daycare over there. It's like a preschool, but they call it daycare. And I don't know about recently, but up until I can remember, the fee there was like, you pay like $300 for the month. And it's a government-run daycare system. So perhaps maybe that's the solution. And then once the kids are school age.
Well, let me put this to you, caller. All daycare centers in the Cayman Islands, preschools, have a waiting list. Even NCVO, I now understand, has an extensive waiting list. So
That's
people
true.
who have
That's a huge
children,
problem.
yeah, people who have children who can't wait 6 months because you got to go to work. You can't tell your employer, oh, give me 6 months until there's an opening at my local daycare center, and then I can come back to work. What are those people going to do?
Well, they need to hire a nanny.
Well,
not a domestic helper.
But let me be very clear about this, because I think this is almost like the gratuities and tips conversation. There are people who use the term nanny and domestic helper interchangeably, and they don't know what the difference is, right? And people who don't differentiate between them. I find that our expat counterparts tend to prefer the term nanny because it doesn't have the same ring to it. It makes people feel more special, I guess, to be called a nanny as opposed to a domestic helper. I know in your mind, you have actually distinguished between the two. Most Caymanians don't see a difference. Most Caymanians are like, okay, if I hire you as a domestic worker, you're to come in my house, help with, cleaning and cooking and potentially looking after children as well. Because as a domestic, if you're working in your home as a mother, those are all the things you do and then some. So if you're not there and you need someone to kind of replace you in your absence, that person's expected to pick up as much of that load, just like you would if you were a stay-at-home mom.
I agree, but
so I think
is not enough for that.
Yeah, I mean,
that's
listen,
my opinion, my unpopular opinion.
Yeah, I mean, there will be people who undoubtedly will say, yes, that's the case. And you have people who oftentimes will sit down and they're like, okay, well, I'm not going to do very much. I'm going to kind of just, watch your children. And they're not even giving you $6 of value when you look at what it is that they're actually doing. But these are some of the things that we, I think, as a community are definitely struggling with and we need to address. I don't call the person who works for me, I don't even call her a domestic worker, although, for immigration purposes, that's what she is. But I call her house manager because she does things to help me manage the household that, my life would be so much more challenging if she wasn't here.
And I have one more statement before I go. Also, on the flip side of it too, I heard something about, ESO. Well, in the last census, and this is where I will give a knock at the domestic helpers. In the last census, a lot of people did not want to answer the questions. They didn't want to tell people how much money they were making or where they were working, et cetera, et cetera. But then you expect the government to solve all your problems when they don't have the correct data.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's a bunch of issues with it, but personally, I think $6 is not livable.
Well, what do you think
Whether
it should
it's
be?
fair or not, I don't know.
Yeah. What do you think it should be?
Yeah, I don't know because I've never been in that situation
Right.
Like I've never made that little amount of money, but I know with the amount that I am making, it's hard enough. So I can imagine. So I don't know what the livable wage is, but I don't think it's $6.
Right. And do you, let me ask you a question in terms of, your qualifications. Do you have something outside of a high school diploma?
Yep. I do. Sure do.
And you have years of work experience?
Yep.
So those are some of the things that when we have a conversation about someone increasing their earning power, I'm always surprised at why we never have the conversation about how the individual has an obligation to do more to increase their earning power. You don't have to stay a domestic worker. You can go out there and get certifications and degrees and other things that increase your value.
True.
I see and know a lot of domestic workers who can't even read and write. And there are people who are leaving their children with them, hoping that they don't ever have to read something on a medication bottle and get it wrong, or whatever else that could potentially even put their child's lives in danger. Because again, you're at the bottom of the barrel and you're just hiring any and everybody. Sometimes they're mixing dangerous chemicals together, ammonia and bleach, and about to blow up your house because they don't even understand the dangers of that. But your argument is they're worth more than $6 an hour?
Well, I don't know. That's just
You see how you can look at it from a slightly different perspective?
But then,
right?
How do you differentiate? Like, how do you say, okay?
Well, I mean,
do you say, okay, if you can't read or write, then you make $6 an hour?
Well, I'm just saying the people who are making.
How would you differentiate between those?
I think what needs to happen is that people who find themselves in that at the bottom of the minimum wage barrel, or that's where they are. They have to think about what they can do to increase their earning power. You don't just increase your earning power. And I mean, I think this is the issue with minimum wage. The government will dictate that everybody is now going to get, I don't know what they're going to increase it to, but say it's $9 an hour. The government will dictate that. Individuals get used to this concept that, I don't have to ever do anything to increase my earning power. As a business owner, I have to do things every single day to increase my earning power. It just doesn't happen because I want it to happen.
And I mean, I agree with that too, but it's not that simple. Like if you're working X amount of hours in the day, like take for instance a domestic helper, right?
Mm-hmm. And listen, even if they changed it, let's be fair, even if they changed it to $25 an hour, right? That person will always be a minimum wage earner. Because again, they've not done anything themselves to increase their earning power. So people will only ever pay them what the minimum wage is. As a previous caller said, you'll find people not even do that. People will take advantage of them. And a lot of them, knowing that they have, they don't have that option, they're going to be like, well, I'm going to come here just like they do now. Somebody's going to take out a work permit for me who can't even afford to pay me a single dollar. And then I must go out in the streets of Cayman and hustle, selling illegal numbers, prostituting my body, because that's some of what's going on in this country, and all of these other things in order to make money.
Yeah,
that's already happening now.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Well, I agree with a lot of what you're saying, and I don't know what the solutions are. But take, for instance, like a domestic helper, right? One of the ways they can increase their earning power, like what you said, is to get a driver's license, right? A lot of times people will pay you more if you have a driver's license, if you can pick up the kids, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah. But now, going back to your original point, does that person now become
learn how to drive?
Yeah. Well, I mean, does that person now become a nanny because they can pick people up? Going back to your original point of what's a nanny versus a domestic helper or whatever, there's also that question.
Yeah.
So it's interesting, but in other places in the world, like nannies and what do they call them, au pairs or whatever in Europe, they actually are qualified individuals. They have
they have first aid training and all that.
Yes. Yeah. And so that's what I'm saying is we have people here who are calling themselves nannies and don't have any of that. So, people just...
It's both ways. You have people that are overqualified, and then you also have people that are underqualified. There's a big mix.
Yeah.
Anyways, it's an interesting conversation.
No, it is.
And
thank you so
for
much.
bringing it up because it definitely needs to be argued from both sides.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you for your contributions. Appreciate it.
Right.
All right. We've got another caller. Caller, good morning and welcome to the program.
Me again. I'm back.
Oh, okay. Listen,
I'm
quick question, quick comment. Miss Morna says, so Alejandro says, what do you mean? Some of them, it is love taking care of children, Sandra. I know of some of my elders that do that. Miss Morna says, who? She says, grandparents. Hello, I'm trying to find the back door now. I mean, Alejandro, if they want to do that, I guess that's an option for them. My point is, we shouldn't be forcing that on them to make them feel like it's an obligation, because it's not an obligation. When you hit the grandparent time, you should be out there trying to live your best life, vacationing if you can afford it. You should do whatever you want. And if you don't want to take care of your grandchildren and raise yet a second generation, then you don't have to do that. Like, it's not an obligation. That's what I'm saying. They shouldn't feel obligated to do that. And in fact, I want to say that it's in the US that I recently read an article about this pandemic of grandparents being, forced to raise their grandchildren and the negative deterioration that it's here it is, a March 2023 article. The AARP, which is the Association for Retired People, talked about when grandparents are called to parent again. Right. And it's not, even healthguide.org, it's not always something that is in the best interest of the grandparents. It makes their life shorter. So there's an article in The Guardian from 2018 says 1 out of every 3 generations or grandparents, that's over 35% living with grandchildren has sole responsibility for them. That's according to their recent census. And, it's not something that they necessarily want to do. They got arthritis in their fingers and their hands, and they have to comb your children nappy hair. Come on now. I'm just saying, give grandparents a break.
But to add to that conversation, this is assuming that these grandparents aren't themselves still working.
Well, that too.
And in a lot of instances,
or that they're in a position to do it.
They are. In a lot of instances, they are still working to support their household.
Mm-hmm.
Still work.
Yeah. So here we go. Here's some facts out of the U.S. And again, this is why the ESO has such an important role, I think, to play in this country. We need more data collection because having these conversations with data from elsewhere can be helpful. But if we had Cayman data to rely upon, what an amazing thing that would be. So in the United States of America, slightly more than 7 million grandparents lived with at least one grandchild under the age of 18 in the same household during 2020. 1 in 10 American children, which is a total of 7.5 million children, were living in a household with at least one grandparent. And they talked about, family settings may range from multiple generations sharing a home together to a widowed grandmother raising a granddaughter. In particular, however, 2.5 million grandparents carried the primary responsibility of caring for their grandchildren and meeting their basic needs, representing nearly 35% of grandparents who reside with a grandchild. And that was data from the 2019 American Community Survey. They're now calling them, these families headed up by a grandparent, often are called grand families, and they're common among families in which a relative has taken over primary responsibility for the raising of a child from the parents, known as kinship care. Relative caregivers, such as grandparents or adult relatives in a family who've taken it on, and then they go into some additional details about the reasons why. Most of the reasons why are the sort of things that we do not want to promote in this community, right? Potential reasons why. The number one reason is a parent has an addiction or difficulty with alcohol and drugs. That's why grandparents are having to step up to the plate in the vast majority of these cases. Who wants that? Right? So grandparents are not doing it because they really want to be spending all this time with your kids. Trust me, they have better things that they'd probably rather be doing. Another reason, the parent has mental health challenges or emotional problems. Again, not much of a choice there. Child neglect, abandonment, or abuse. The parent is in jail. Youth or inexperienced parents, so like teenagers having kids. Physical health issues or death of a parent. Unstable home life, homelessness, lack of financial resources or lack of general ability. Domestic violence in the home, divorce or other family challenges, and then military deployment. Those are the reasons why grandparents are stepping up to the plate and helping raise kids. Nowhere in there do I see, oh, I just want to do it. Love and affection. Let's be real here. If you're a grandparent and you're listening to this program, like Miss Mona said, she's trying to get out the back door now. Leave her alone.
I can tell you now that my parents have 6 grandchildren and their 3 siblings. Each of us have 2 kids, and I can tell you, my daughter is the oldest, the first, and was the only granddaughter for 10 years.
Mm-hmm.
And their son rose and set on her. They thought that she was the best, the most, and the only precious princess, and they still do, despite having another one, right? But I can tell you, they're not rushing to my house every day of the week talking about, come, let me take care of your children.
Mm-hmm.
I don't in any way feel that means that they love them any less.
Yeah.
I just personally believe that I made a decision, whether I decided or it was unplanned. I'm not going to say unwanted, but unplanned. People get themselves into these situations, and I'm not casting any aspersions or judgment on people. These things happen. That's the reality of life.
Yeah.
Right. But I still do not believe that it is my parents' responsibility to. I am not I can work. I don't have any sort of impediments, addictions, or otherwise ailments that would hinder me from doing so. So it is my responsibility. That aside, going back to your previous caller, and by the way, I really like when she calls and she adds a very, very different and salient point to all discussions. But I don't know. She didn't say whether or not she had a domestic employee. But again, I have a domestic employee. I have 2 kids, one who is 5 and literally just about to go to school. So my need for a domestic helper is somehow diminished, but but it's still there. It hasn't dissolved. My son's 5. Like I said, I work. I have to be here for 8:30. I can't get them to school before a certain time and be to my job. So I need help. Even when there's a second parent in the home, you still need help. We find ourselves needing outside help. That's just the reality. And I can give a personal example and an experience. When I had my son, there's quite a significant age difference between my son and my daughter. And I don't want to make it sound like my daughter's so ancient, but at a time when she was there, cost of living was much less than it even is now. The fact is, and yes, I would love to be in a position to offer my nanny $2,500 a month, because I know that would be a significant, beautiful way of living, not just here, but afford her the same back in her home country whenever she chooses to leave or is otherwise rolled over. However, that is just not the reality. There are plenty of people wake up in the morning and want to do that I simply cannot do because I'm either restricted by my own needs or restricted by other things. But I live in the real world. And when I hired my nanny, I made sure and I said, I want to put whoever I hire, I want to put them in a position that they're not working 4 jobs, coming to my job, tired, and something happens to my son.
Let me ask you a question. I see Alejandro, he's all for the nannies, for the grandparents, right? So he says children that are raised by parents or grandparents have valuable morals and teach social manners and to be desirable. Let me ask you a question, because I think a lot of people haven't thought about this. Often on this program, I talk about the cycle of chaos that we all live in and cycle of abuse from one generation to the next. If you have that type of a situation, I want Alejandro to think personally about his own situation, for example, right? So if you have a parent that has taught you a particular way that may not be the best in the world, and there was dysfunctionality, mental health issues, abuse, whatever, why would you even think that having a grandparent raise your child to continue that cycle of dysfunction is a good idea?
I mean, personally,
how do you ever break the cycle if that's the case? I mean, I'm just saying that's another
my personal information publicly, but I will say I was never abused as a child. None of those things.
But so many people are.
Right, exactly.
And so many people, when you think about, it doesn't even have to be horrible abuse, but when you think about how your parents, thought differently than you and how they grew up differently than you. I mean, do you really want your children from one generation to the next, never even learning anything new or different? Or, I'm a little bit suspicious about that being a legitimate reason.
I would give it. People can get all up in their feelings and their partners in a bunch. Quite frankly, I don't care. They're my children, and I'm going to do what I believe is best with the information that I have. And I'm not saying that my parents did anything wrong. My parents did the best they could with what they had, the information that was available to them at that time.
Exactly.
My parents were spanking people. They were spankers. They were spankers. I have 2 children. And I can tell you, I I will not say that I don't spank. I'm not a spanker. It doesn't work for my children. It doesn't work, period. So for that reason, I know that, for example, my dad is a spanker. Well, because I don't like that, me dictate to him how to do things. He's probably not the best placed person for long-term care for my children. Because guess what? My children are children.
All right.
And they sometimes do not know any better.
Yeah, leave me there. We do have another caller on the line. Good morning, caller, and welcome to the program.
Hi, good morning.
Morning there.
I just wanted to make a quick comment. What are people really complaining about? How long has the minimum wage been $6 an hour?
Yes.
And they sat down and let the progressives do whatever it is they wanted to do.
Yeah, well, they're the ones who claimed they were going to change it. Yep.
Nobody wasn't concerned. But the only reason why everybody is up in an uproar now is because it's starting to affect more Caymanians than the expats. That's the only reason.
And is that really the case, though? What evidence do we have to say that that's the case?
Well, I mean, me personally, from what I see on a day-to-day basis, is starting to, affect more Caymanians now than expats. Because even jobs that used to pay $10 or $12 an hour a couple of years ago can't even pay their employees that now. New employees coming in, you could see the wage go down more and more and more. You know what I mean? So I really don't think Caymanians should complain. They made their bed, they need to lie in it. That's my opinion.
Harsh reality. Thank you, caller. Again, I don't know that it's a situation where Caymanians are being impacted by the minimum wage. They're being impacted by the cost of living. Andrea says, this is an interesting one, and then we have a Cayman Voices segment this morning that we're going to do. But Andrea says, poor young hot grandmother these days who are living their best lives. They don't have time for grandbabies, laughing out loud. There is that segment of the population as well, who, again, if they're in their 60s, they're traveling, they're living their best lives. They're really not interested in raising your kids. I don't know how hot they may be, but yeah, some of them still, they're trying to twerk at carnival. So maybe. Delroy, good morning. Delroy says, first to start with, how old are most grandparents nowadays? Again, we don't have any of that data available. He says they're still in their 30s and 40s. Grandparents? Well, if that's the problem, if that's the case, then you got more problems than being a grandparent. But anyway, so he says, how can they do much? They have CUC and water bill to deal with, so they have to be out there. Well, that's to the previous caller's point that a lot of grand people, even if they're in their 50s, 60s, or 70s, are still working. Romelia says, good morning, honey chow. Have a blessed and victorious day in the Lord. Camaria says, talk truth now. Grandmas are now 30-ish. Really? So they had kids at 15? Lord Jesus, they're not gonna be able to help you anyway. And like I said, chances are you don't want those grandparents. They probably didn't do the best job raising you. So if you lucked out and you're okay, you don't want them touching your children to mess up another generation. So find another plan. So Camaria says grandparents are now 30-ish. Gone are the days when grandparents are old women cooking, baking, washing, and sitting on the veranda knitting. Honey child, they might still be doing some of those things, but again, they're probably still working and trying to survive themselves. Morning, caller. Welcome to the program.
Morning. What I hear being discussed right now are the symptoms, not the cause. The world has been in a crisis since 2008. If governments had done what needed to be done in 2008, they would have burnt the entire financial system to the ground. So what they chose to do instead is use their credit card to pay their mortgage. And since 2008, we've been going downhill really fast. What is being discussed this morning is one of the symptoms of that reality. And it's not getting any better.
And what happened in 2008?
The financial crash. You remember when the government when the essentially what happened is that money was loaned to people, and banks loaned money to people. Bad debts were building up, and instead of the banks just writing those losses off, what some of them decided to do was to take them and package them up in a security. And then they got the rating agencies to falsely label them as being good instruments, right? Like AA rated, and then pension funds bought those instruments thinking they were good investment. Well, when everything collapsed, the US government went as far as taking ownership in certain companies as collateral for the loans to bail out big businesses. You remember, too big to fail? And so we're still managing that crisis today. But to make it worse, what's actually happening now is you have the green agenda that's raising the cost of living around the world. This is not just a Cayman thing. Don't be fooled with that. They're raising the cost of living on top of trying to manage that crisis. In 2020, when you had the virus, the Federal Reserve created trillions of dollars and gave it away. Well, I'm here to tell you that you have to pay the cost of borrowing that money. Okay? There's no such thing as free money. Now, I could get into the reasons why this is being done, which I won't do today, but I'm just explaining that. You think of it like this. If you're flying in a plane, you can go straight down and crash into the ground, or you can glide gradually, and at some point in the future, hopefully the crash won't be as bad. Financially, that's essentially what's happening. That's why the cost of living is out of control. If there's anything that the Cayman Islands government can do, it is go back in history, and there's a man whose name was Basil Johnson. Okay? He had the courage and the wisdom to look at his government back then and say, you can't afford that. Tighten your belt. The politicians that are in the House today don't understand that. That's not even on their radar. And who's paying the price? The average person. Okay? That's just a hint of what's wrong. What you're discussing are the symptoms. Let's address what's causing the symptoms, and we'll be farther ahead than complaining about the symptoms.
All right. Thank you very much. This person says, good morning. Please let them know minimum wage is the least you can earn. Some people don't know what minimum wage means. They think that it is all they will be paid. And again, I encourage people to know and to understand that their earning power can be largely influenced by some of the things that they themselves decide to do. Here's a little bit of interesting information. Again, when you have data and statistics, you can make data-driven decisions, something we really need to learn to do in this country. So in North Dakota, for example, they took a sample of the grandparents, and here's an interesting bit of information. 57% of them are white and not Hispanic. 29% are American Indian and Alaskan natives. 7.5% are Black or African American. 2% are Hispanic or Latino, and 5.5% may be of other races. 47% have no parents of the child in the home. So again, this leads to my opinion that a lot of instances where grandparents are stepping in it's not really that they're trying to be supportive in the sense that, oh, the parents out there working and earning and bringing an income into the home. They're supporting it because they have no choice. They have no choice but to raise their grandchildren because, again, the reasons that we saw earlier, they're on drugs, they have mental issues, they have emotional issues, there's child abuse and child neglect. They're in jail, so they're not even there. That's why the grandparents are stepping in. 61% are over the age of 60. So the question that we just had, or some people of the opinion that, oh yeah, these are 30-year-old grandparents. Well, we don't have any statistical information available in the Cayman Islands. Data. So we can make data-driven decisions and have data-based discussions. All the D's coming into play this morning, right? So in this particular instance, 61% are under age 60, but of course, I would like to know how much under age 60 or how much over age 40. So again, more information. 15% of those people with the grandparents are living in poverty. What a hot mess. One of the other things that oh gosh, there's so much that I was listening to our Canadian visitors talk about yesterday. They're talking about the benefits, right, that they have, again, for this, the lady who, she can get the death benefit, the MAID, but she can't get benefits to continue living. And then there was something else that they had mentioned where they're giving some kind of a tax break or something to people who are making less than, I think it's less than 40,000 or 45,000. But then the poverty line is considered 30 something thousand in Canada. So there were and they're bragging about the number of Canadians who would receive that benefit being in the millions. So they're like, wow, they're bragging about the fact that most Canadians are at or near or below the poverty line and they're going to be getting this particular benefit. I was like, that's really, really interesting. Y'all need to pay attention and listen to what's happening, not just in your own country, because some of these things can help you make decisions about what's happening here. Let's take a quick commercial break. We are going to change gears a little bit. And then Alejandro says, we're not Americans. Sad that we compare ourselves to America. Alejandro, you're missing the point. I need you to pay attention in class. The point is we have no data here in the Cayman Islands to speak of. If we had the data, or you know where I can get it from, send it to me. So we don't have the data here. We can only go off of, generally speaking, we can look at data from anywhere in the world. We can look at data from other Caribbean countries if they have it. We can look at data from the UK. We are looking at people who have available data, available details, and that is how we can further this conversation. You can speculate and say anything you want about what's happening in the Cayman Islands. The fact that you have no data to back it up means that it's not fact, it's an opinion. And that's my problem with even our politicians not being in a position to be able to say how we're making and why we're making the decisions that we make. Why are we prioritizing certain things when they simply don't have the data to back it up? So this isn't about asking America how you feel. This is about show me the data in Cayman to support your opinions and things that you might say are factual or not. You don't have it. So in lieu of not having it, we have to look at people in jurisdictions who actually believe in data and who collect this information. It's as simple as that.